Enough. Servants who saw them together. Records of payments Marcus made to silence witnesses. Letters. His scarred mouth twisted. I've been collecting proof for years, waiting for the right moment to use it. And now they'll leave us alone. Because they know I'll ruin them if they don't. Adrian looked at Elena intently. But you need to understand something. By protecting you, I've made you a permanent target. They'll hate you even more now. I don't care. Elena realized it was true. She had spent her whole life being invisible, powerless, afraid. But now, standing in this room with this scarred, brave man, she felt something new: strength. Let them hate me. I'm not afraid anymore. Something flickered in Adrian's eyes: surprise, admiration, something deeper. You should be. The Ashfords are dangerous when cornered. Then we'll be dangerous too. Elena stepped closer, close enough to see the silver flecks in his gray eyes. Together. Adrian's breath caught. His hand lifted, hovering near her face as it had in the portrait gallery. Elena, I'm not. I can't. Can't what? She whispered. Can't let myself want this. Want you. His voice was ragged. I'm broken. Damaged. I have nothing to offer except pain and regret. That's not true. Elena's hand covered his, pressing his palm against her cheek. His skin was warm and scarred and perfect. You offered me life when I was dying. You offered me dignity when I was degraded. You offered me a future when I had none. That's not enough, Adrian said, but his hand curved against her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. It's everything, Elena breathed. For one suspended moment, the world held its breath. Adrian's eyes searched hers, and Elena saw his control cracking, his walls crumbling. She saw the man beneath the scars, the lonely, hurting soul who had convinced himself he was unworthy of love. Speak of laws, Marcus. Shall we discuss what happened 5 years ago? How your affair with Isabella started the chain of events that ended in fire and death. Lord Ashford's face went white. Lady Victoria's smile faltered. Yes, Adrian continued, his voice soft and deadly. I know. I've known for years. You were there that night, weren't you, Marcus? In the garden with Isabella. And when she went back inside, you followed. You were there when the fire started. That's absurd, Lord Ashford blustered, but his voice shook. Is it? Shall I call witnesses? Question servants from that night? Dig into records that might show exactly where you were when those curtains caught fire. Adrian smiled, and it was terrifying. I've spent 5 years gathering evidence. I know everything. The silence that followed was absolute. What do you want? Lady Victoria hissed. Drop the charges against Elena. Leave my property. And never come near me or anyone continue under my protection again. Adrian's voice was steel. Or I will destroy you both so completely that no one will remember the Ashford name except as a cautionary tale. Dangerous truths. After the Ashfords left, defeated but seething with rage, Adrian called Elena into his study. She found him standing by the window, his shoulders tense. Thank you, she said softly, for protecting me. I should have done it years ago, Adrian replied without turning. I should have exposed them after the fire. But I was too broken, too lost in grief and guilt. Why didn't you tell anyone about Isabella and Lord Ashford? Because I was ashamed. Adrian's voice was hollow. Ashamed that I'd been such a fool. That I'd loved someone who betrayed me. That I hadn't seen the truth until it was too late. He finally turned to face her. But no more. The Ashfords have shown me that silence protects only the guilty. Elena crossed to him, compelled by something stronger than fear or propriety. What evidence do you have against them? Lord Thornwell, Lady Victoria said with false sweetness. How wonderful to finally see you after all these years of isolation. We've come on a rather serious matter. Adrian's expression was carved from ice. State your business and leave my property. So hostile, Lord Ashford said. We simply came to report a crime. We've recently discovered that you're harboring a thief. A thief? Adrian's voice was dangerous. The girl you took from our manor. Lady Victoria's eyes found Elena, gleaming with malice. She didn't just break my vase. She stole it. Took it outside to sell to a fence. Dropped it in her haste to escape. We have a witness who saw her. That's a lie. Elena gasped. Is it? Lord Ashford produced a document. We have a signed statement from another servant confirming Elena's theft. The vase was worth £3,000. Theft of that amount is a felony punishable by prison or transportation. The magistrate, a nervous-looking man who clearly didn't want to be there, stepped forward. I'm sorry, Lord Thornwell, but if the charges are true, I must take the girl into custody. The charges are false, Adrian said coldly. Elena is innocent. Then she can prove it at trial, Lady Victoria said smugly. Constables, take her. The two constables moved toward Elena. She stood frozen, unable to believe this was happening. After everything, after finding safety and hope, the Ashfords were going to destroy her anyway. Then Adrian stepped between Elena and the constables, his scarred face terrible in its fury. You will not touch her. Lord Thornwell, the magistrate said nervously. Please don't make this difficult. The law must. The law. Adrian's laugh was bitter. You speak of law to me? When everyone in this room knows the Ashfords are lying. He turned his burning gaze on Lord Ashford. Shall we? If you had been anyone other than who you are, Catherine might not have thought you were worth saving. Elena crossed to him, standing close enough to see the pain swimming in his gray eyes. She chose to help you because she saw something in you worth preserving. Don't make her sacrifice meaningless by wasting the life she saved. Adrian stared at her, something shifting behind his expression. You sound like her, he whispered. She said something similar once. She told me I was kinder than I knew. She was right. For a moment they stood in the moonlit gallery, surrounded by ghosts and memories, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Then Adrian reached out, his scarred hand hovering near Elena's cheek but not quite touching. You should hate people like me, he said roughly. People who have wealth and power and waste it on vanity and blindness. People who let good people die. I don't hate you, Elena whispered. I see you, Adrian. Not your scars. Not your past. Just you. His hand dropped. You shouldn't. He turned and walked away, leaving Elena alone in the gallery with the portraits and the moonlight and the aching certainty that she was falling in love with a man determined to remain broken. The Ashfords strike back. The next morning everything changed. Elena was working in the household office when Mrs. Sterling rushed in, her face pale with worry. There's someone at the door demanding to see the master. Lady Victoria Ashford and her husband. Elena's heart plummeted. Why would they come here? I don't know, but they're not alone. They have a magistrate with them and two constables. Elena hurried to the entrance hall, where Adrian was already facing their visitors. Lady Victoria looked exactly as Elena remembered. Cold, beautiful, and cruel. Lord Marcus Ashford stood beside her. A tall man with calculating eyes and a smile that made Elena's skin crawl. A section she had avoided until now because the servants said it made Lord Adrian sad. She walked down a long hallway lined with paintings, studying the faces of Thornwell ancestors, stern men and elegant women who stared down from gilded frames. At the end of the hall was a room with double doors slightly ajar. Elena pushed them open and stepped into a magnificent gallery. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dozens of portraits covering every wall. And there, in the center of the room, was Isabella. Elena approached slowly, studying the woman who had once held Adrian's heart. Isabella was undeniably beautiful, golden hair, blue eyes, perfect features. But there was something cold in her painted smile, something calculated in her gaze. Other portraits surrounded Isabella's. Adrian as a young man, unscarred and smiling. An older couple who must have been his parents. And there, in a small frame in the corner, a painting of a young woman in a maid's uniform with kind brown eyes and a gentle smile. Catherine. I had that painted from memory after she died. Adrian's voice came from the doorway, startling Elena. I wanted someone to remember her face. Elena turned to find him standing in the shadows, his scarred face hidden. Mrs. Sterling told me what happened, she said softly. About the fire. About Catherine and Isabella. Adrian stepped into the moonlight, and Elena saw raw pain etched in his features. Then you know what I am. A man who let a servant girl die while trying to save a woman who never loved him. You're a man who tried to save everyone, Elena countered. Who risked his own life again and again. Catherine's choice to help you wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? Adrian's voice was harsh. She died because of my blindness, my stupidity. If I had seen Isabella's true nature, if I had been more careful, if I had. The beam fell on him, Mrs. Sterling said, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. Pinned him down with Isabella beneath him. The flames swept over them both. Adrian was screaming, trying to shield Isabella with his own body, trying to drag them both free. That's when Catherine ran in. The maid who saved him. She was so small, so young. But she was strong and brave. She pulled debris away, helped Adrian drag himself and Isabella out. But as they reached the doorway, another beam fell. It struck Catherine, killing her instantly. Mrs. Sterling wiped her eyes. Adrian got out with Isabella, but his face and arm were burned terribly. And Isabella? She died from the smoke 2 days later in the hospital, without ever waking up. The weight of guilt. Elena sat in silence, processing the horror of what she'd heard. He blames himself, she said softly. For everything, Mrs. Sterling confirmed. For not seeing Isabella's true nature earlier. For the fire starting. For Catherine's death. He believes he should have died in those flames instead of her. She looked at Elena intently. He's been punishing himself ever since, hiding here, refusing to live. What about Lord Ashford? If he was involved with Isabella? No one speaks of it, Mrs. Sterling said bitterly. The Ashfords claimed they barely knew Isabella. Society accepted their lies because it was easier than facing an uncomfortable truth. And Adrian was too broken to fight them. Elena's mind raced, pieces falling into place. That's why he saved me. Why he hates the Ashfords so much. Partly. But also because you remind him of Catherine. Mrs. Sterling's expression softened. The same kindness, the same gentleness. When he looks at you, I think he sees the girl who died to save him. And he's determined not to let that sacrifice be meaningless. The portrait gallery. That evening, Elena found herself drawn to the east wing of the manor. Elena listened intently, trying to imagine Adrian as he had been. Unscattered, unbroken, happy. But Isabella was not what she seemed, Mrs. Sterling continued, her expression darkening. She was vain and selfish. She loved Adrian's title and wealth, but not Adrian himself. I saw her with other men more than once, flirting and making promises she shouldn't have made. But the master couldn't see it. He loved her blindly. What happened the night of the fire? There was a ball. A winter celebration. The manor was full of guests, decorated with hundreds of candles. Isabella had been drinking champagne all evening, becoming louder and more reckless. Mrs. Sterling's hands trembled slightly. Around midnight, one of the servants, a sweet girl named Catherine, came to me in tears. She had just seen Isabella in the garden, kissing Lord Marcus Ashford. Elena gasped. Lord Ashford? Lady Victoria's husband. The same. He was younger then, recently married, but already showing the cruelty that runs in that family. Mrs. Sterling's voice hardened. Catherine wanted to tell the master, but I convinced her to wait until after the ball. I thought we could spare him the humiliation of a public scene. But you didn't get the chance. No. Shortly after 1 a.m, someone screamed, "Fire!" Mrs. Sterling's eyes grew distant. It started in the ballroom, in the curtains near where Isabella had been standing with a candelabra. Within minutes, flames were everywhere. Guests stampeded toward the exits. People were crushed in the panic. Elena could picture it, the beautiful ballroom transforming into hell, silk gowns catching fire, crystal chandeliers crashing down, screams echoing through smoke-filled halls. Adrian tried to save everyone, Mrs. Sterling whispered. He went back into the flames again and again, pulling people out. He found Isabella trapped in the music room, unconscious from the smoke. He was carrying her toward the door when part of the ceiling collapsed. The manor's secrets. 3 weeks passed like a dream Elena feared to wake from. Every morning, she woke in her comfortable room, dressed in clothes that actually fit, and joined the household for breakfast. Her duties as household administrator were challenging but manageable. Answering correspondence, organizing supplies, managing accounts, and coordinating with Mrs. Sterling on household matters. But the real work, Elena was beginning to understand, wasn't administrative. It was unraveling the mystery of Adrian Thornwell. He was nothing like what society said. The servants' gossip about a violent, temperamental recluse was completely false. Adrian was quiet and thoughtful, kind to his staff, and generous with his time and resources. He spent hours each day reading in his library, walking the grounds regardless of weather, and supporting local families who struggled through the winter. Yet there was a wall around him, invisible but impenetrable. He never smiled. He rarely laughed. And whenever Elena came too close, physically or emotionally, he would retreat, putting distance between them like a man afraid of his own feelings. "Give him time," Mrs. Sterling advised one afternoon as they worked together in the household office. "The master has been alone for 5 years. He's forgotten how to let people in." "Tell me about the fire," Elena said. "Please. I need to understand what happened to him." Mrs. Sterling's hand stilled over the linen she was folding. Her kind face grew sad and distant. "It was the worst night of our lives," she said softly. "The night everything changed. The night that changed everything. 5 years ago, Thornwell Manor was different," Mrs. Sterling began, her voice heavy with memory. "It was full of light and laughter. Lord Adrian was young and hopeful, engaged to Lady Isabella Whitmore. She was beautiful and charming, and society adored them both. Outside the window, snow still fell softly, covering the world in white. But inside Thornwell Manor, fires burned warm and bright, promising shelter from the cold." Elena looked at Adrian across the table, at his scarred face and sad eyes, and she made a silent promise. He had saved her life when she was dying in the snow. Somehow she would find a way to save him too, from his pain, his isolation, his belief that he was a monster unworthy of love. She didn't know yet that this promise would cost her everything. She didn't know that the Ashfords weren't finished with their cruelty, or that fire and blood would come again before their story reached its end. All she knew was that for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was meant to be. And so their story began, not with love at first sight, but with two broken people offering each other the only thing they had left to give: a chance at redemption. "You're intelligent," Adrian interrupted. "Mary told me you can read and write, which is rare for someone in your position. You're kind, which is even rarer. And you need a place to stay." His scarred mouth quirked slightly. "I need help. We can benefit each other." "Why?" Elena whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes distant. "Because 5 years ago, when I needed help most, when I was broken and burning and certain I would die, someone showed me mercy. A servant girl pulled me from the flames even though it meant risking her own life." His voice grew thick with emotion. "She died because of her kindness. Because she tried to save me. I've spent 5 years wishing I could repay that debt." "Isabella," Elena breathed, remembering what Mary had said. "No," Adrian said softly. "Isabella was my fiancée. She died in the fire. The girl who saved me was a maid named Catherine. No one remembered her name. No one mourned her. She was invisible in life and forgotten in death." He looked directly at Elena. "I won't let that happen again. I won't let someone be discarded and forgotten simply because society doesn't value them." Tears burned in Elena's eyes. "I accept," she whispered. "I'll work for you. I'll help you." Adrian nodded, something like relief crossing his features. "Good. Then welcome to Thornwell Manor, Elena. I hope you'll find it a better home than the one you left. A new beginning." As they finished breakfast, Elena felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she could truly help this scarred, broken man, or if he could truly save her from the poverty and powerlessness that had defined her existence. But for the first time she had a choice. For the first time someone saw her as more than invisible hands doing invisible work, but a simple day dress in soft blue wool, well made and warm. Beside it was a note in elegant handwriting: "Join me for breakfast when you're ready." Elena dressed carefully, her hands trembling slightly. What would Adrian say to her this morning? Would he send her away now that she was warm and recovered? Where would she go if he did? She made her way downstairs, following the sound of voices and the smell of fresh bread. The breakfast room was smaller than she expected, cozy and warm with morning sunlight streaming through tall windows. Adrian sat at the table reading a letter, his scarred profile turned toward the light. He looked up when she entered and something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps or appreciation. "You look better," he said simply. "Please sit." Elena sat across from him, painfully aware of how strange this was. A servant eating breakfast with a lord, treated as an equal rather than property. "Thank you for the clothes," she said. "And for everything else. You saved my life." Adrian set down his letter. "I did what anyone should have done. The Ashfords are monsters." "Not everyone sees it that way," Elena said quietly. "Most of society thinks they're wonderful. Society is often wrong about what matters." Adrian poured tea for both of them, the domestic gesture somehow intimate. "I want to make you an offer, Elena." Her heart jumped. "An offer? I need someone to help manage my household correspondence and social obligations. Mrs. Sterling is excellent, but she's not young anymore, and the work is becoming too much for her." He met her eyes steadily. "I'm offering you a position here. Not as a maid, but as a household administrator. The pay is fair, the work is reasonable, and you'll be treated with respect." Elena stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. "But I'm just a servant. I have no experience with." He pretends to be heartless and cold, but he's the kindest man I've ever known. Why does he hide here? Why doesn't he go out into society? Mary's expression grew sad. "Because of what happened 5 years ago. The fire that scarred him and killed Lady Isabella. He thinks he's a monster now. He thinks people will be horrified by his appearance." She shook her head. "But it's not true. Everyone who works here loves him. He's fair and generous and good." "What happened in the fire?" Elena asked softly. "That's his story to tell, Elena." Mary moved toward the door. "But I will say this. He carries more pain than any person should have to bear. He blames himself for things that weren't his fault." She paused at the doorway. "Maybe you can help him see that. You seem like someone who understands pain." After Mary left, Elena lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling. The warm milk sat untouched on the bedside table. Her mind was too full of questions and possibilities to sleep. She thought about Lady Victoria's cruel laughter as the guards had dragged her away. She thought about the cold snow and how close she had come to death. And she thought about Adrian's scarred face and storm-gray eyes, about the gentleness in his hands as he had lifted her, about the warmth of his voice when he told her to just be safe. Something had begun tonight. Elena didn't know what it was yet, but she could feel it like a seed planted in frozen ground, waiting for spring. Morning choices. Dawn light filtered through the bedroom curtains, waking Elena from a sleep deeper and more restful than any she had known in years. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then memory returned, the broken vase, the snow, Adrian's scarred face and gentle hands. She rose and found that someone had laid out clothes for her during the night. Not servants' clothes. Mrs. Sterling helped Elena to her feet, chattering about hot baths and warm food, but Elena barely heard her. Her mind was spinning with questions. Why would a reclusive lord save a servant girl he didn't know? What did he want from her? And why, despite everything she had heard about the scarred duke, did she feel safer in his presence than she had ever felt in the Ashford manor where she had worked for years? Whispers of the past. Later that night, after Elena had bathed and eaten and been dressed in a soft nightgown that was far finer than anything she had ever owned, she lay in a warm bed in a beautiful guest room and tried to make sense of her new reality. Through the walls she could hear servants moving about, their voices low and respectful. Unlike at the Ashford manor, no one shouted here. No one screamed or threw things or issued impossible demands. The atmosphere was peaceful, almost gentle. A soft knock came at her door. "Come in," Elena called, expecting Mrs. Sterling. Instead, a young maid entered, carrying a tray with warm milk and honey. She was perhaps Elena's age, with kind brown eyes and a friendly smile. "Mrs. Sterling thought you might want something to help you sleep," she said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Thank you," Elena said. "What's your name?" "Mary, miss." The girl bobbed a small curtsy. "I work in the household here." "I'm Elena," And I'm not a miss. I'm a servant too. Or I was until today. Mary's expression softened with sympathy. We heard what happened. The Ashfords are known for their cruelty. You're not the first person the master has saved from them. Elena's eyes widened. He's done this before? Mary glanced toward the door, then lowered her voice. 3 times that I know of. He watches the Ashford manor sometimes, when he walks in the woods. If he sees them being particularly cruel, he intervenes. She smiled slightly. Elena studied him more carefully now that they were in the light. The burn scars were severe, pulling and twisting the left side of his face. But beneath the damage, she could see the man he had been. Strong features and intelligent brow. Eyes that held depths of feeling most people spent their whole lives running from. You're beautiful, she heard herself say, too cold and exhausted to filter her thoughts. Adrian's head snapped toward her, his gray eyes wide with shock. What? Elena's cheeks flushed, embarrassment cutting through her exhaustion. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have, I just meant. She struggled to find words. Your scars don't hide who you are. I can see the kindness in you. That's beautiful. For a long moment, Adrian simply stared at her. Then his scarred mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile or might have been pain. You're delirious from the cold. Maybe, Elena admitted. But I meant it. The proposal. An elderly woman bustled into the room carrying an armful of clothes and followed by 2 maids with steaming buckets of water. Poor dear, she clucked, hurrying to Elena's side. Let's get you warmed up properly. Come along now. As the woman, Mrs. Sterling, Elena assumed, began fussing over her, Adrian moved toward the door. You'll stay here tonight, he said, his back to Elena. Tomorrow we'll discuss what happens next. My lord, Elena called out, stopping him. I have nothing. No money, no position, nowhere to go. I can't repay your kindness. Adrian turned, and in the firelight, his scars seemed less like damage and more like battle marks, evidence of survival. Then don't repay it, he said quietly. Just accept it. But, tomorrow, he interrupted gently. We'll talk tomorrow. Tonight, just let yourself be warm and safe. He left before Elena could respond, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. And now he was carrying Elena through a snowstorm, saving her life when she had already given up hope. Why? Elena whispered. Why are you helping me? Adrian's scarred face tightened, but he didn't look down at her. I saw them throw you out. I was passing by when I heard Lady Victoria's laughter. His voice darkened. I know that sound. The pleasure of watching someone suffer. An unexpected offer. They emerged from the storm suddenly, and Elena saw Thornwell Manor rising before them like a castle from a dark fairy tale. It was massive, built from gray stone that seemed to absorb the winter light. Tall windows glowed with warm amber light, and smoke rose from multiple chimneys, promising heat and shelter. The heavy doors opened before they reached them, and an elderly man in butler's livery stood waiting. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Elena in Adrian's arms, but he said nothing, merely stepping aside to let them enter. Prepare a room for our guest, Adrian commanded, carrying Elena into a grand entrance hall. Have Mrs. Sterling bring hot water, warm clothes, and food. Quickly. Yes, my lord. The butler disappeared up a curved staircase. Adrian carried Elena into a sitting room where a massive fireplace blazed with heat. He set her gently in a chair near the fire, then draped a heavy blanket around her shoulders. Elena's hands shook as she pulled the blanket tight, her body beginning the painful process of warming. Thank you, she managed, her voice barely audible. You saved my life. Adrian stood back, maintaining distance, his scarred face half hidden in shadow. The Ashfords are cruel, he said simply. I've known that for years. You know them. Something dark flickered across his expression. I used to. Before. He gestured vaguely at his scars. Before I became this. Without another word, the stranger knelt beside her. Elena saw his face for the first time and gasped. The left side of his face was marked by terrible burn scars, twisting from his jaw up to his temple, pulling at his eye and mouth. But his eyes were the most striking thing about him. They were a deep gray, like storm clouds, and they held depths of pain that made Elena's suffering seem small in comparison. "Lord Adrian Thornwell, I'm going to lift you," he said, his scarred face showing no emotion. "Don't struggle." Before Elena could respond, he slid one arm beneath her knees and another behind her back, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing. The warmth of his body immediately began to thaw her frozen limbs, and she couldn't help but lean into it, desperate for heat. "Who are you?" she managed to whisper through chattering teeth. "Someone who knows what it's like to be cast out," he replied, carrying her through the snow as though the storm didn't exist. His long cloak billowed around them both, creating a cocoon of warmth. Elena's mind struggled to make sense of what was happening. Through her haze of cold and confusion, she recognized something about the man. Those scars, that voice, rumors flickered through her memory like candle flames. Lord Adrian Thornwell. The Scarred Duke. The burned beast of Thornwell Manor. The servants whispered about him constantly. He had been handsome once, they said, until a terrible fire had destroyed half his face and killed his beloved fiancée 5 years ago. Since then, he had become a recluse, hiding away in his manor on the edge of the forest, never attending society functions, never allowing visitors. Some said he had gone mad with grief. Others claimed he had become a monster, violent and dangerous. Lady Victoria and her friends spoke of him with cruel amusement, making jokes about his appearance and speculating about whether any woman would ever be desperate enough to marry such a creature. Where could she go? She had no family, no friends outside the manor, no money, no shelter. The town was 2 miles away through the forest, and in this storm, she might not survive the journey. Tears froze on her cheeks as she stumbled down the steps. Behind her, she could hear laughter from the parlor windows. They were watching her exile as entertainment, placing bets on how far she would make it before the cold claimed her. Elena's legs shook with each step. The snow was already ankle-deep, soaking through her thin shoes and numbing her feet. She could feel the cold seeping into her bones, making her movements sluggish and clumsy. "This is how I die," she thought. Alone in the snow, punished for an accident, mourned by no one. The stranger in the storm. She had made it perhaps 100 yards from the manor when her legs gave out. Elena collapsed into the snow, her body too cold and exhausted to continue. She curled into herself, trying to preserve what little warmth remained. The wind howled around her, and the snow fell harder, already beginning to cover her like a burial shroud. "I'm sorry," she thought, though she didn't know who she was apologizing to. Her mother, perhaps, who had died to give her life. The world for being too weak to survive in it. Herself for believing that kindness mattered. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the cold. Then warmth. It came suddenly and possibly, cutting through the freezing air like summer sun through winter clouds. Elena's eyes flew open, confused and disoriented. A figure stood before her, tall and broad-shouldered, wrapped in a long black cloak that seemed to absorb what little light the storm allowed. For a moment, Elena thought death itself had come for her, taking the form of a dark angel. "Can you stand?" The voice was deep and rough like gravel and smoke, but there was something almost gentle in it. Elena tried to speak, but her teeth chattered too hard to form words. She managed only a slight shake of her head.